Welcome back to The Explainer. So, today we're unpacking a deep and honestly fascinating history hiding right in plain sight, inside the mundane furniture in our homes. Far from just everyday objects, your couch, your dining table, your bed, these things actually represent thousands of years of human hierarchy. We're talking intense global trade, incredible craftsmanship, all cleverly disguised as just the status of stuff.
Take a second and just look at what you're sitting on right now. Seriously, glance down. Is it an office chair, a stool, maybe a super comfy sofa? You see, today, seating is mostly just about comfort and utility, right? But I want to pose a question to get us really thinking about this. When did a chair become a symbol of power? Like, when did a few pieces of assembled wood suddenly mean you ruled over thousands of people?
Well, let's dive right into this. The reality is, for the vast majority of human existence, simply having things to sit or sleep on was an exclusive, undeniable display of massive wealth and divine right. For the everyday commoner in the ancient world, furniture, at least as we know it today, it just didn't exist. You sat on the floor and you slept on the floor. So to have a physical object explicitly designed to elevate your body off the ground, that was the ultimate flex. It screamed to everyone around you that you had access to rare materials, highly skilled artisans, and just immense power.
Section 1. Seats of Power, Gods, Pharaohs, and Thrones.
A perfect place to start is ancient Greece. You see, the modern word throne actually comes from the ancient Greek word thronos. But a thronos wasn't just, any old chair. It was a seat specifically designated for deities or individuals of supreme honor, and it was often heavily decorated with precious stones and ivory. The Greeks heavily contrasted these ornate, majestic seats with what everyday people used. A commoner? They might use a simple, backless, easily portable stool called a dipthros. So right from the language itself, we see this incredibly strict division: backless stools for the ordinary and heavily ornamented thrones for the divine and the elite.
And wow, just look at how far the ancient Egyptians took this concept of physical elevation. Take Tutankhamun's golden throne. It was covered entirely in gold sheet, the legs featured golden lion's head capitals and ivory claws, and the seat itself literally sat upon gilded bronze drums. The pharaoh wasn't just sitting down, he was being physically and metaphorically hoisted above everyone else in the room, riding on the back of a golden lion. It was an absolute masterpiece of intimidation and divine right, built entirely into a chair.
But, and this brilliantly illustrates the point, power doesn't always have to mean a massive golden armchair. Take the Roman Selic Carolus. At first glance, it's just a scissor-folding stool. It literally folded up for easy transport. But in ancient Rome, this specific folding stool was an incredibly profound status symbol. It was reserved exclusively for high-ranking magistrates and emperors. It was literally a seat of power that could travel with you, proving that even a highly practical, portable piece of furniture was heavily gatekept by the political elite.
Section 2. Ancient Beds and Floor Mats. The rich versus poor contrast.
The contrast here is just absolutely stark. Let's say you were Egyptian royalty, like Queen Hetepheres. You slept on a sloped, gilded wooden bed, often shaped like a bull, enclosed in a golden canopy to keep out the bugs. And you rested your head on an intricately carved ivory headrest. Sounds nice, right? But for the everyday commoner over in ancient Samaria, the reality was sleeping on simple, woven reed mats placed directly onto a dirt floor. The gap in living standards was quite literally the difference between sleeping on gold and sleeping in the dirt.
And this wasn't just an Egyptian or Sumerian phenomenon. Across wildly different geographies and eras, staying close to the floor was just a standard reality. In Samaria, reed mats were used for sleeping, eating, even building houses. In ancient Japan, the Shinden style relied heavily on tatami mats and sliding fusuma screens, which kept daily life firmly at floor level. And over in Mesoamerica, Aztec households relied on dirt platforms and woven mats. Because floor dwelling was the global norm, having elevated furniture stood out as a highly visible, highly intentional anomaly of the rich.
Section 3. Wood, Wealth, and Trade. The literal links of empires.
So, the crucial point is, why was elevated furniture so rare? Well, the geographical reach required to build just a single royal chair in ancient Egypt was staggering. Native Egyptian wood was actually pretty poor quality. It was scarce, and honestly, it wasn't great for building durable, heavy furniture, so they had to import it. Ebony, which was one of the rarest and most valuable woods, had to be brought all the way from Kush and Punt just for royal thrones. Sweet-smelling cedar, that was dragged from the mountains of Lebanon and Syria, And precious stones like lapis lazuli used for those gorgeous inlays, well, those were mined internationally. The global trade networks required just to furnish a pharaoh's living room were absolutely massive. In fact, wood was so vital and so incredibly scarce that felling an enemy's trees was considered a legitimate military objective. This is such a fascinating historical fact. The Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III literally waged military campaigns in Lebanon just to gather cedar wood. He treated timber with the exact same reverence and desire as plundered gold. Just imagine that for a second. Deploying an entire ancient army not to conquer a city, but to chop down their pine and cedar trees so you could build better chairs and chests back home. No way, right? But it's true.
And once they finally got that plundered or traded wood back home, well, the real work began. Ancient carpenters endured this really intensive, multi-step process. First, felling trees with simple axes, removing the bark, and then cleaving the logs into boards using mallets and wedges. They even had to air dry the wood on lumber stacks so it wouldn't warp in the harsh Egyptian climate. They used primitive pole saws, which actually were brilliantly designed to be pulled rather than pushed, so the carpenter could use his free hand to hold the wood steady. And they used sharpened copper adzes to carefully preserve every single inch of these highly precious imported materials.
Section 4. The evolution of dining, from the Great Hall to the home office.
Let's move to dining and see how this builds. Check out this 1552 inventory from a grand estate called Paget Place in England. It specifically lists a table with 2 trestles. Now, back in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, grand European dining tables weren't permanent fixtures at all. They were these massive, heavy wooden planks placed on trestles that could be completely dismantled when the meal was over, just to clear the Great Hall for other activities. These dismantleable tables were so highly prized, they were individually cataloged in legal wills and property inventories. That's a real game changer for how we think about a room's purpose. And we can actually trace the amazing journey of the dining space, starting right from those very trestle tables. It began in the Middle Ages in the massive, bustling Great Hall, where the whole estate ate together in a strict hierarchy. Then, by the 18th century, things shifted. The Great Hall was abandoned for a more intimate dining room, and we saw this strict gender split where men stayed in the dining room for drinks, while women withdrew to the drawing room. Fast forward to the modern era, and the dining room became a standard, dedicated room right next to the kitchen. But you know, history is cyclical. Just recently, during the pandemic era, those dedicated dining rooms reverted right back into chaotic, multi-use spaces serving as home offices and classrooms, honestly, much like the flexible great halls of the past.
Section 5. Preserved in time. How do we know all this? Seeing how perishable wood is, how on earth did wooden chairs, beds, and tables survive for thousands of years for archaeologists to study today? Well, we only know this history because of a few incredibly unique circumstances. The primary reason we have so much ancient Egyptian furniture is because of their deeply held beliefs in the afterlife. They locked this furniture inside completely dry, perfectly sealed tombs. Over in ancient Rome, we owe our knowledge to a tragedy, the 79 CE eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The pyroclastic surges actually perfectly carbonized the wooden beds and tables in places like Herculaneum, literally freezing them in time. And for cultures that didn't do either of those things, we rely heavily on art, like Babylonian cylinder seals, Greek vases, and Dilmunite pottery, which depicted the furniture of the day.
Which leads me to this final, provocative thought to leave you with. If a volcano suddenly froze your living room today, perfectly carbonizing it for archaeologists to find 2,000 years from now, what would your furniture say about you? Would they see your office chair and deduce your occupation? Would they look at your dining table and see a multi-use family hub? Every single object we own carries the hidden history of our lives. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and we will catch you next time.